Hello, explorers, and welcome to Reach the World. For 25 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens, all through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's very special live stream event. Today, we're reconnecting with Reach the World explorer and Fulbright U.S. student program researcher, Erin Wheeler. Erin is a linguistic anthropologist who will be joining us today live from Argentina's Patagonia region, where she's exploring through the lens of language. I can't wait to hear more of what she's been up to. But first, I want to give a very special welcome to the teachers and students who are joining us today, including a classroom in Wisconsin, who we're going to see a little bit later and give a chance to ask some questions directly to Erin. This is the second live stream event of Erin's virtual exchange expedition, so we're going to include as many student questions as possible for Erin today. And if you are curious about something Erin's talking about today and watching through this live stream event, please feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll work it into the conversation as we go. So with that, I think we're ready to get this adventure underway. I am going to bring Erin to the screen and we can say hello. Hey, Erin.
Hello. Nice to see you, Tim.
Yeah, nice to see you again. Erin, it's been a couple of weeks since we got to connect with you last, but in the meantime, you have been writing some outstanding articles for Reach the World, and I want to make sure that I put the link to your virtual exchange homepage up on the screen, so if anybody who's watching has not had the chance yet to read your articles, they can get caught up a little bit on what you've been up to. But we're going to talk about it too today because there's so much to discuss. You were telling me before we went live that you've been doing a little bit of travel lately. Can you tell us what you've been up to?
I have. So I've been taking lots of bus rides to go to different cities that are around this area, both for fun and for the research that I'm doing. The most recent place that I went is a small city called Villa La Angostura. It's about 6 or 7 hours away in a bus.
You can go ahead and keep going. I'm just making you big on the screen.
Oops. Okay, you can still hear me. Sorry about that. So it's about 6 or 7 hours away on a bus from where I am right now. And I went here to meet with some people who were teaching different languages. So I was learning about languages that are spoken there. I also got to go on a really cool boat ride out on some of the lakes, and I got to see a national forest. And so that's been a really fun trip. And I just got back from that a few days ago.
Fantastic. And you wrote a really nice article, a field note transportation article about what it's like to get around in the Patagonia region. I'm going to add the link to it right here for anybody who wants to read it afterwards, but include some great pictures of what it's like to go on some long bus rides to different places around Patagonia. Can you just sort of take us aboard a bus virtually? Just give us a feeling of what it's like to be a part of a long bus journey to some distant location in Patagonia.
Sure. So there are different types of buses. If you're going on a trip that's just maybe 4 or 5 hours long, it'll be kind of more like just a typical bus, more like a school bus maybe that you would have in the United States, except for usually there is a bathroom on it. But for these really long bus rides, like bus rides that are 12 or 15 or even 20 hours long, the bus often is 2 stories. So there are people sitting on the first part that's closer to the road and then a second story. And you get different types of seats, but the fanciest seats that you can get on this type of bus lean all of the way back to sort of become a bed. So the idea is that overnight, because a lot of the long bus rides are overnight, you can sleep on the bus. I cannot sleep on the bus because the bus is rattly and there are people making noise and it's very difficult for me, but it is nice to sort of have those comfy chairs. Also on these buses, they usually give you dinner, sort of like if you do an overnight flight on an airplane, they give you dinner. I had never been given a meal on a bus before in the United States, so that was sort of interesting to see, but they bring out a meal. The bus will stop a few times along the way to get gas. You can get off the bus, stretch your legs. But people here, it's very normal to take a super long bus ride, much more common than it is, at least in the places that I've lived in the United States.
Well, I have to ask, if there are meals being served on the bus, is there a tiny kitchen? Is there, how do meals get produced on a bus?
They seem to be sort of made ahead of time and then just kept in a way that keeps them warm for however long is necessary. So there's not really space for a kitchen.
It sounds like a fun adventure, and we all know that you are in this part of the world because you are doing research specifically on language and including things like music. Can you give us just a brief reminder before we start showing some pictures of what brought you to Argentina and what brought you to Patagonia while you're there?
Yes, so I am doing research here looking at indigenous music and languages of the region. And so, what I mean by indigenous is that the peoples who lived in these lands first. So, in the United States, we often use the term Native American. Here in Argentina, these groups are called the original peoples of Argentina. I'm mostly working with people from a community called the Mapuche, and I'm looking at the language that's spoken by the Mapuche people, which is called Mapudungun. And I'm also looking at music traditions. And what the pictures that we're going to see in just a minute are mostly focused on is some of the research that I have been doing with music traditions.
Great, Erin, what a great introduction to your pictures. I'm going to add them to our screen here. Whoops, I'm going to bring us back to the beginning. And I'm going to sort of take myself off the screen. You just give me the signal when you're ready to go to the next one.
Okay, it seems like the pictures aren't loading yet for me. Here we go. You can hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So this first picture is a picture of a traditional Mapuche instrument maker who I've gotten to visit with several times while I've been here. So this is somebody who has been creating these traditional musical instruments for many, many years. His name is Alvarino. So Alvarino lives in a small Mapuche community that's about an hour and a half away driving from the bigger city that I'm staying in. It's not that big of a city. And so he has a workshop behind his house where he lives, where he works on creating these different sorts of musical instruments. And so I've gotten to see the process of how different instruments are built, and also gotten to even try out playing some of them myself, which has been really interesting. So in this picture in my hand, you can see I'm holding two pilpilka, which is a type of woodwind instrument, sort of like a flute, in my hands here. And in a second, we're going to see some pictures that will give you a little bit of a closer up view of what these different musical instruments that are played by Mapuche people look like. So this is a picture of kind of a workshop table that Alvarino has. So here you can see some of the instruments that he's working on building, and you can also see some of the tools that are used to make these instruments. So you can see kind of in the bottom left here, you have the pilpilka that I mentioned before. And you can see these different materials. So common materials that are used to build these instruments are lots of different types of wood. Stones are sometimes used. Animal skin is sometimes used. And also sometimes seeds or things like that are also used. So those are the main materials that are used to construct the instruments. And so here's a close-up of that instrument, the pilpilka, that I mentioned before. So it has a single hole in the top, and the way that you play it, there might be a better picture in a minute, I can't remember, is by blowing air sort of across the hole. And so this doesn't let you make a whole bunch of different pitches. Like if you think about a flute, like the traditional flute, right, that you hold like this, that you play, that is like the Western flute. And I actually am a flute player in the United States. This instrument really only kind of makes one or two pitches because it just has this one place that you blow the air in. So it's used more like a percussion instrument, right? So it's used to keep the rhythm in a song, things like this. This is a different instrument. This one's called a pilodo, which I find a very fun word to say. So as you can see, unlike the pilpilka, this one has multiple holes here. And so you're blowing the air across the different ones. Some of these are like go further into the instrument than others. Some of them are more shallow. And so that lets you get different pitches when you're blowing the air to get different sounds. Both of these instruments that we're looking at, you can see how they're kind of rough around the sides. And this is because they're not finished yet. So I think the next picture maybe shows the finished versions of some of these instruments. So you see how these are so much more shiny and polished. They've been sanded down, both to help with the sound and so they don't give you splinters when you're holding them. But you can see here some of the pifilca that are finished, as well as just some other items that Alvarino has carved. He also makes carvings like this horse that you can see up in the corner that aren't necessarily instruments, but that are just, wooden carvings, because some of the skills that you need to just do wooden carvings are the same as the ones that are used to create the different instruments that are played. So this is another instrument here. This instrument is called a trutruca. You can see how long it is. It's made out of a plant called the coiwe. You can see it's kind of like a stick of bamboo or something like that. And so the way that it's made is that these trees are chopped, and then in order to hollow it out, so this originally, this really long stick was cut into 2 pieces, hollowed out, and then attached back together again. You can see a horn at the end that usually comes from a cow, and you blow into the mouthpiece. It's very tricky to play because look at how long this is. You have to have a lot of air to get a sound to go all the way from the mouthpiece out the end. And the next picture, I think, is a picture of me trying to play this instrument, the trutruca. I had a really hard time. To play it, you blow air and you buzz your lips. I don't know if anybody listening plays the trumpet or the tuba or the trombone. It's a similar way that you play those instruments. But again, this instrument is really long, so it takes even more air, I think, than playing something like a trumpet does. There's also a version of this instrument that is kind of curled up that you'll see in a minute, but they're both often called the trutruca.
Erin, I want to interrupt briefly because I see the students we have waiting backstage to ask you their questions seem very animated by some aspect of this instrument, this one that we saw most recently. And I think they may have a question or two about the instrument, or maybe something that reminds them of. So let's pause for a moment and take a couple questions, all right?
Okay.
All right, Miss DiBanana's class, I'm going to bring you on, joining us all the way from Wisconsin. I saw definitely a classroom reaction to the is trutruca. Am I saying it right?
Trutruca. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were there some connections in your class with that instrument? Something it reminded you of, maybe?
Very long. So she asked, why is the instrument so long?
That is a good question. I don't actually know if I know the reason why. I mean, I think it's because those trees, right? They have these sort of bamboo-like trunks that are really long like that. And so it being long lets you make, when you can blow air all the way through it, it can make a really loud, powerful sound, right? That really gets someone's attention. So I think that might be one of the reasons. It's a good question. I'll have to ask Alvarino the next time that I see him.
All right, Elliot, what's your question about the instrument? So we're asking about the instrument right now.
What is your favorite instrument?
Ooh, my favorite. I like the trutruca just because it's different than other instruments I've seen and tried to play before. I also really like the pilolo, the one I showed that had sort of the different holes on top that you move across your mouth and blow into. I find that one really interesting too.
All right, good question. Should we take one more question about instruments, and then Erin can show you some more of the things that she discovered?
All right, raise your hand if you have a question about instruments, Jackson. Oh, so about instruments. We're talking about instruments first. We can save that for later. That's a good question. Omar?
What kind of sound does the instrument make?
Ooh, that's a good question.
So I don't really have a good way to play the sound for you right now, but what I can do is I have some videos of these instruments being played, and I'm going to send those to Tim afterwards, and he can send it to your class so you all can listen and hear what they sound like, because I think it would be fun for you all to hear. And so I do have some good recordings of those that you all will get to listen to later.
Ooh, that is a great question and a great answer. I want to hear these instruments being played too. So when Erin sends me the videos, I'll send them to your class too, so you can see what they sound like, okay? All right.
I would say the trutruca sounds a little bit like a French horn, maybe, if I had to compare it to an instrument that I know a little better.
All right, thanks for those early questions. I'm going to move you backstage, students, and we'll bring up Erin's pictures again. And Erin, sorry for the interruption. Please proceed.
Not at all. Okay, so can we go to the next photo here? Great. So another instrument I wanted to talk about, because it's really important, maybe the most important instrument for Mapuche communities, is this drum that you can see here, the circle. It's a drum called the kultrung. So this is not just a drum, right? So it's something that, yes, it's played as a musical instrument. People play it in different ways with their hands, with drumsticks, but it's also really important because this instrument represents the Mapuche people. So you can see, I'm actually going to show you here on my water bottle, I have a sticker of the Mapuche people's flag. Do you see this yellow circle on here? This is the same thing, right? It's a picture of that drum that you can see in the photo on screen. So this drum is used as an image to represent this community on their flag, on maybe a book about the community. You'll see a picture of this. So it's really important that way too. You can see that the drum is divided into 4 parts, and the number 4 is really important for Mapuche people. It represents lots of things. It represents the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, right? So all of these different things. And then you see the images here too of the moon, of a star, of the sun. And all of these have important meanings within Mapuche storytelling and Mapuche culture. So again, this drum is called the kultrung. And it's played in lots of different settings, so people can play it more casually, but it's also really important in religious ceremonies that this community has when someone will play this drum. And in the background here, oh, sorry. In the background here, I also just want to point out this other instrument here, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute, which is called the cascahuillas, which are like bells, right? Another percussion instrument. And so here, this is just a picture of some street art that I saw the other day. And so again, you can see that circle, the picture of the kultrung, the drum, that also, you know, when you see that, you know that this has something to do with the Mapuche people. And then here is somebody playing this instrument at an event that I went to. So this is a singer, a Mapuche singer named Anahi Ryan Mari Luan. She is someone that I am doing research on, and I've seen her perform several times, but this is a picture from one event that I went to. One other thing that I'll say about this instrument is that a lot of instruments, traditionally for Mapuche people, women do most of the singing and men play most of the instruments. But the kultrung is the exception to this. So it's oftentimes women who play this particular drum. And so Anahi, here, she's singing and she's also playing the kultrung drum. As I mentioned before, this is the cascahuillas, which is like bells, right? They sound, a lot of cultures have something like this. The word cascahuilla, which has become a word in the Mapuche language, actually is originally from the word cascabel, which comes from the Spanish word. These can be made with metal. They most often are today, but before that, this instrument was actually made with seed pods that would make the sound instead of the bells. And then this, remember how I mentioned before that the trutruca, the really long instrument, sometimes is made in a different way? So this is the different way. So this is kind of the same instrument, but it has been turned into a circle, right? It's been bent and spun. This makes it a lot easier to take someplace with you because you don't have something that's like 5 feet long that you're trying to carry, right? So you often see this a lot more commonly at events or something like that. And I think it's really just because this is much smaller and easier to move around. The sound is a little bit different because of the different shape, but it also has a similar kind of horn sound. And then finally, this is actually the same musician who we saw a picture playing the drum of before. This is a different event that I saw her perform at. You can see this was an outdoor event. It was really lovely. And here she's playing the drum with 2 drumsticks, which is a different way to play it. So you can play it with 2 sticks, you can play it with 1 stick, and you can play it with your hands depending on the situation.
All right, Erin, thank you so much for sharing those pictures with us. I want to just reiterate for everyone, are you just a really big music fan, or why are you going to see all of these music related things? How is it linked to your work?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I'm super interested in music is that this connects also to the research that I'm doing with language. So I am looking at how music is a way that a lot of Mapuche people are reconnecting and working to preserve and to keep people using their native language, and also just different cultural traditions from the community. So there was a long time in Argentina when it was seen as kind of a bad thing to be Mapuche. But now people are proud of being Mapuche again. And so music is a big way that people are doing this, a big way that people are expressing themselves. And there's a lot of people who are working really hard to make these traditional instruments again and use them in music again. And so that is one of the main things that I'm looking at in my research.
All right, fantastic. What a great expedition, if you call it that. We certainly do, to Patagonia to research this interesting topic and use language as the lens through which you understand this area and the Mapuche people. Miss DiBenetto's class, it is time for you to ask some questions if you have some. And I'm going to open it up to include not only language and music, but you can certainly ask Erin questions about those. She's an expert on the topic. But if you have questions about everyday life in Argentina and in Patagonia, I'm sure Erin would be very happy to answer those too. So let's bring you back on. And if any of those students who are sitting there who have been so patient and have their hand kind of like starting to raise, if you want to come forward one at a time and ask your question, you can ask it right to Erin.
Has a question. Hey, Jackson, do you want to ask your question? Yeah, what's your form of transportation other than maybe a bus? We talked about bus before.
So the main ways that I've gotten around is to get here from the U.S. first. I flew here on a plane. And since I've been here, usually bus or walking. I live in a pretty small town. So when I go to the grocery store, for example, I can just walk there. It's less than 10 minutes for me to walk. So lots of time walking. A lot of people here also have motorcycles. I have not been brave enough to try driving a motorcycle, but maybe while I'm here, who knows?
Thank you. All right, any other questions? We have, okay, Mason.
When you're on like a bus, you get like food and stuff, but how do you go to the bathroom?
That's a great question, a very important question. So usually there is a little tiny bathroom on the bus, just like there are little tiny bathrooms on airplanes. But a lot of times it is not very nice to use a bathroom on a bus, especially when the bus is moving, right? Because the bus is shaking all around. So the buses also do stop different places. And so oftentimes people can get off the bus to go into like a gas station or a little kiosk or something to use the bathroom.
Awesome, thank you. All right, any other questions? Aria? Ooh, good question. What kind of restaurants do you guys have?
So there are a lot of different restaurants here. One thing I will tell you is that the time that people go to restaurants to eat is really different here. So dinner here, if you eat dinner at 8 p.m. in the evening, that is a very early dinner. Most people in Argentina eat dinner at about 10 p.m. Do most of you eat dinner that late, or does that seem very late to you? It seems very late to me.
Yeah. What time do they wake up then? Or go to
They
bed?
wake up at this. They tend to wake up a little bit later, but not too much later. People here to me just don't seem to sleep as much. But the other important thing is that oftentimes here in the middle of the day, people have a siesta, which is kind of like nap time, right? So most kids, like who are your age, go to school in the morning, and then in the middle of the day, they will go home. They will eat lunch with their families at their house, maybe take a nap, maybe relax a little, and then go back to school again. So there's this time in the middle of the day when most students go home to eat their lunch rather than going to the cafeteria at school to eat.
Interesting. All right, any other questions? Charlie, what's a question that you have?
How do you like? Where do you get water from?
So where do you get water from?
So the same way that I do in the United States. So I have a sink here. I get water the same way. This isn't a place where I have to do something unusual to get water. It's safe to drink the water where I am. The one thing here that is different with water is that if you go to a restaurant, usually in America, right, you can ask for just like a cup of water rather than the water bottle. You can't do that here. It's very strange if you ask for tap water. You have to get a bottle of water if you order water at a restaurant or something.
Thank you.
You have to buy water.
They do bottled water. They don't do tap water at restaurants. All right, let's see. Omar, what's your question?
What's the biggest mountain you ever climbed?
Oh yeah, what's the biggest mountain you've ever climbed?
You know, I'm not actually 100% sure what the tallest mountain is, but kind of the big mountain close to where I'm living is called Kafue Mawida, which is a word in the Mapuche language that means blue mountain. I've climbed this mountain several times. It's very, very steep, but if you climb to the top, you get a really beautiful view of the city that I'm living in down below. So I think that that is the tallest mountain I've climbed for now.
Yeah, we did see a picture of that yesterday. Okay, any other questions that we have? Landon, what's your question?
How do you get like? How do you get electricity?
How do they get electricity?
So electricity. Sorry.
Sorry.
So electricity here is the same in cities like where I'm living. It's pretty much the same as in the United States. I have lights here. I have, different things that use electricity. If people are in like really rural areas, sometimes they don't have electricity. And so when you don't have electricity, what do you have to do? Well, you have to make a fire to cook food. You have to light candles to see. But where I'm living, I just go home. I turn on my lights. It's the same as in my apartment back home.
All right, Mariah, go ahead.
How long have you lived here?
Oh, good question.
How long have I lived here?
Yep.
So I have been here about 2 months now. It seems like it's been like I've been here both longer and shorter, but I've been here about 2 months and I will be here until the middle of December. So a pretty long time to be away from my family and the things that I'm used to, right? But I really like it here. So I'm happy to be here.
All right, and then Montel, what's one of your questions?
What? Do you have deserts?
Oh, yeah. Do you have deserts in Argentina?
There are deserts in Argentina. There aren't deserts in the area right where I am living, but there are deserts more in the north of Argentina. So I don't know if you looked at Argentina on a map. It is a really, really long country. So there are many different climates here. And so in the kind of the very far north part, more in the provinces that are called Salta and Jujuy, there are really deserty areas here. It's a good question.
Yeah, great. And then how much time do we have for how many more questions do you guys think?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we do about 5 more questions? Does that sound good? I want any student who has a question, I'd love to give a chance to ask it.
Thank you. Okay, Aiden, can you ask a question?
Can you speak in their language?
Oh, that's a good question.
Ooh, so the main language that most people speak where I'm living is Spanish, and I do speak Spanish. So yes, I can speak Spanish. The other language I'm studying, the Mapuche language, Mapudungun, that I mentioned, I'm learning right now. So I can speak a little bit, but not that well. I'll say one thing to you so you can hear what it sounds like. So the way to say hello in Mapudungun is Mari Mari. So if you say Mari Mari, that means hello, hi.
Should we do
and
it?
what that word means is Mari is the word for 10. So it's like saying 10, 10. And the reason that they say that is because if I am saying hello to another person, I have 10 fingers, right? That person has 10 fingers. We're saying hello. So we say Mari Mari. My 10 and your 10.
Should we practice?
We already did all the questions.
Hey guys,
All
let's
right.
try.
How about Erin says hello to us first, and then we say hello back, and we can do it all in the language of the Mapuche people.
Okay, so I'll say Mari Mari.
Mari,
Mari.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You freezing.
That's okay. All right, who has another question?
Oh, she's back. Good.
All right, Elliot.
Do you have similar restaurants here?
Do you have similar restaurants? So that
We
the
already
question
asked
yesterday was if you had the McDonald's over there, but so any similar restaurants?
That was my
the same?
idea.
Yeah.
There are McDonald's in Argentina, but there aren't in the city where I'm living. They're not any like chain restaurants that you would know from the United States. If you're in Buenos Aires, which is like the big city, the capital of Argentina, there's a McDonald's there, there's a Starbucks there. They have things that are a little bit different on the menu than the things that they have in the United States, but they do have those. But in the little town where I'm living, no, there aren't any restaurants that you all would know. So some of the restaurants serve things that you can get in America, like you can get a hamburger, you can get pasta, but there are other things that are really difficult to find. So where I'm living, for example, it is really hard to find any sort of Asian cuisine. So Chinese food, Japanese food, Korean food, that is not something that I can find here.
Then we can ask Jean DL, what's one of your questions?
Do you like living in Argentina?
Or what's your favorite part? Yeah, what's your favorite part of living in Argentina?
So I do like living here, yes. Well, there's lots of good things. I think one thing that I like is that, and this might also just be because I'm living in kind of a small city here, is that people aren't so busy rushing around all the time. People work less, usually less hours during the week. People spend more time with their family, socializing, kind of hanging out with friends. And I think that's really nice, that there's a little bit of kind of a slower pace of life and people take life a little more slowly rather than always rushing to get things done.
Awesome, thank you. Right, and other questions? Montel? What's what?
What's the name of where she's at?
Oh,
The name of where she's at?
for the country she's in?
Country. To say the country again.
Wait, could you share the country's name again with us that you're at?
Yes. So the country I am in is Argentina, or as they say it in Spanish, Argentina.
Argentina.
Okay, something like that. Yeah.
Could
Okay,
be.
another
Argentina.
question. Raise your hand. Okay, Aria. So what do you do in Argentina, like in your typical day?
Yeah, so most days here, it depends on the day, but oftentimes I will get up, I'll have some coffee and breakfast. I oftentimes will go for a run or a walk in the morning, and then I go around and do various things. So I'm doing a lot of interviews with people where I'll go and I'll meet with someone and I'll ask them questions to learn things. So oftentimes I'll meet up with one or maybe two people to do that. I also will go to events, like because I'm studying music, like we saw earlier, I will maybe go to watch a music performance. I'll take notes. I'll talk to the people, the musicians after they perform to learn about music. Sometimes I will go to a school because I'm looking at studying language to see how the language is being taught. So those are some of the things I do during a normal day for me here.
Sweet, thank you. Okay, Charlie, what's your question? What kind of phones do you guys have there?
So I am still using actually my same phone that I brought from America, but I have a special SIM card that lets me use it here in Argentina. So people have phones here. It's not as common for people to have an iPhone. And if you're in the big city here, you have to be really careful because it is very easy to get your phone stolen. But in the place where I am, that's much smaller. That's a lot more rare. But people have different kinds of phones, just like they do in the US. But usually phones and computers are really, really expensive here. So people don't have, maybe as fancy or as new phones or computers.
All right, maybe one more question
I have one
that we
more.
can ask Savannah.
Sorry.
Oh, we asked that one already. How long have you lived here? Okay, what's another question? One more. Maddie?
What is your? What is your?
What number is it? Oh, we asked that one already. Let's think of another
I have
one.
one more.
Okay, Omar?
How many people are in
Ooh, that's a good one. If we know how many people live there.
So I'm not remembering off the top of my head how many people live in the whole country. I'm sure that's something your teacher can look up and tell you. But in the city where I'm living, which is called Escal, there are about 30,000 people. I'm not sure, I don't know how many people live in the city where you live. I know it's when you hear a number like that, it can be kind of hard to know. But it's the city where I am is kind of the biggest city in this area. There aren't a lot of big cities in Patagonia. There are a lot of really small little towns where people live. And so the city where I live, there's a hospital here that people from the country come to go to. It's kind of an urban center, even though it's a pretty small city.
Those are all such great questions, Ms. DiBenetto's class. I'm so grateful for you for the great questions for Erin today. I feel like we could go on asking questions for quite a long time, but I know you're getting towards the end of your school day. And I just wanted to thank you for joining us today and for sharing your questions. It's been really, really nice to hear about what you're curious about. Should we give a big goodbye and thank you to Erin for joining us from Argentina today?
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. It was a great day seeing you.
It was nice to meet you.
All right. Wow. Great conversation, Erin. Thank you so much. Thank you to Ms. DiBenetto's class and everybody who joined us for today's live stream event. Erin's doing an amazing job of sharing weekly stories from her fieldwork on her Reach the World Virtual Exchange Journey homepage. So make sure you don't miss a single article. I shared the link a little earlier in the live stream. And for the full menu of Reach the World's Explorer Program virtual exchanges, be sure to visit about.reachtheworld.org/explore. And you can visit that site anytime to see all of our virtual exchange programs. We hope you'll join us again for another virtual exchange expedition soon. And Erin, it was wonderful to see you. Thank you so much again for joining us today. Have a great week.
Thank you. You too. Goodbye.
Bye.